All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, and thank you for everyone who has joined. This is going to be a recorded webinar, so if you need to cut out early for any reason, don't worry, we will save this and send it out later. But just to introduce what we're doing here today, this is a Jumpstart success story with our one and only Josh Massey, the founder and CEO of Carepool. Carepool is part of our 2019 portfolio. We've had the pleasure of working with Josh and his team really for the past couple of months. It's been an exciting ride, pun intended, where we've been able to help introduce him to some great partners. He's made a lot of impressive progress and some exciting stuff ahead. So without further ado, I really want to let Josh introduce himself, where you're from, what Carepool is, and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Eller. Appreciate you having me on today. But once again, I'm Josh Massey. I'm the founder and CEO of Carepool. I am from Madison, Wisconsin, and decade-long entrepreneur. Got started in Chicago into the tech sector with recruiting, and since then been building products the last few years. And Carepool originally started as Ride Alfred, so that was in 2016. But the basic concept of using the Uber and Lyft laws and the model, changing it for what would work in more of a Midwest setting where if you're not in Chicago or a big city, it's the pre-book style model. And so we started in 2016, then the Health and Human Services Department had reached out to us, the state of Wisconsin, and asked us to join some of their needs. And we ended up pivoting completely to Carepool in 2017, which is now focused on people with disabilities and the aging population, and delivering rides in rural areas for rural health systems. So been very focused on that ever since.
Awesome. And so I got connected to you originally because you went through a generator program.
Yep.
And I think at that point you had already transitioned to Carepool. So maybe tell me a little bit about your experience kind of going through generator and coming out of it, and what the benefit of that experience was, and kind of what led you to come into Jumpstart.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say enough good things about the generator network and kind of that experience overall. I'm in their offices now, and it's just a really great network of people. We had been approached and we met through them. And I guess I was at a point where I knew I could build the product and get to a certain point, but I needed capital. I needed to figure out how to raise capital, and that's something I'd never done before. So going into the accelerator program really helped me refine my pitch and work on the deck and just how do you get the message across very succinctly. And that was when we first connected. And after kind of our first interactions and checking a reference or two, I knew that I kind of wanted to pursue that relationship further.
Cool. And so when you were going through Generator, I remember first talking to you going through Generator. I loved the product, loved kind of the market and the specific customer base that you were addressing. But I knew that you had a vision and were getting ready to scale things significantly. What did it look like from just a product and team perspective as you were getting ready to scale throughout Wisconsin, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we engaged, we just had a minimal viable product, and it was just getting to the marketplace with our first revenues. And so we had, kind of a small core team. It was only 4 of us, only 2 full-time, and just kind of using my initial network of folks that I knew I could trust and bring in. That's how I was able to get to market with a product that had a fit initial, and just kind of figuring out where to go next was the moment that we had met. And then looking at how to build it out, the next phases was the path I was looking for.
Yeah. And so obviously how you got to know us, that was through Generator, which I always thank them, and they are a great source of good companies for Jumpstart. But what was it? I mean, I know we talked when you were going through Generator, but then when you actually submitted an application for funding, what was it about me, or what was it about Jumpstart really that that kind of made our fund and our platform seem attractive to Carepool?
Yeah, there was a lot of things. I think just the ease of the process and the ability to be really straightforward with a venture team is very hard to find. And I felt like I got that from you and Gabe right away. Then when we were engaged with Vic, it was also very straightforward. You could see he coming from the traditional venture capital background, but really loved the fact that you're all leaning on your network of experts and solely focused on healthcare to the point where you're finding companies after you learn where the problems are in the market. And so you were, Vic was explaining to me, talking with certain people, I know that this rural model is needed. I know your pre-book model is something that I've heard from others in the market that is going to be a big deal, and you're ahead of the curve. And so I thought that was really cool that you can have that level of advice and venture backing, and kind of the model change of traditionally like taking a board seat and starting to get control in the company early on was not there. So it was able to kind of become a venture backed company, frankly, and then but also without having to lose kind of that initial control in the early phases to a board seat, but still getting that traditional support.
Yeah, awesome. Talk to me about, so obviously Gabe and I and Vic were all very involved in the whole process, kind of from application to review to interviews and eventual selection. But I'm curious, just your mindset going through that. I guess we haven't really talked about that. So hesitations that you had, or just kind of thoughts as an entrepreneur that is going through that application process with Jumpstart. This is really for the benefit of other entrepreneurs listening that are maybe considering applying. What were your hesitations initially?
I'd never raised money before, so it was already an interesting process, a new process for me, but kind of wondering whether I should look at maybe one investor that's going to put in a very large sum and maybe give up some of that control and kind of let the terms go for that time period, or whether a nice amount that was going to be enough to be like a lead investor to be able to follow on. And so for me, it was a question mark of, okay, I do have other potential offers that are at a larger number, but what I can get here from the value of this network along with the leadership of your investment was greater. And so I had to take a little more risk, I guess, to be able to look at maybe a smaller number up front, but understand that I could trust that with that backing and with that kind of stamp of expertise, that others were going to see that value and follow on. And so, there was a big decision to make and at the time, but it definitely, I made the right decision, and I was able to kind of use that leadership, use that lead investment as the terms to close the round that I was looking to close for my runway I needed.
Yeah. And so, over the last couple of months, since we've really been working together, what have you felt were kind of some of our biggest accomplishments, maybe some of those hesitations relieved, that are positive between the Carepool Jumpstart relationship?
Absolutely. So I guess being able to get engaged down in Nashville with your network is amazing, and been there twice for the Founders Conference as well as our kickoff, and just kind of delving into that network of experts and having those days where we got to bounce ideas off of so many great business owners and people in your network that just, you feel a lot of support. And then kind of with the classes that we were in, and then the other founders we got to meet, a lot of us have forged relationships, and we have ongoing calls, and we're able to lean off each other. So that's one really big thing I'd just say overall is just the network of experts that you have access to is huge. And then every time I'm kind of looking at a different state where I'm like, hey, Vic and Eller, I'm looking at Minnesota, I'm looking at Kansas. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here you go. Introduction to Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kansas, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Minnesota. And then I'm on the phone with their venture. And it's like, it's a great thing like that, getting introduced by someone they trust. So yeah, I think overall that's been going really well, and we're making a lot of progress.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, kind of trying to gear this webinar towards potential entrepreneurs that are thinking about applying. Would you recommend Jumpstart Foundry to a healthcare entrepreneur, or maybe better phrased is what type of healthcare entrepreneur and in what stage would you, now being a Jumpstart Foundry portfolio company, would you recommend to other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I guess the stage of like right around the fact of being an accelerator, or like at the point where you've got an MVP, you've got a product that you know you have a market fit and you have a customer. And so once you get to that point and you really know you have that flushed out, you're ready for either, that an accelerator program, or, it could be you might not even need the accelerator program to go straight through Jumpstart to kind of be able to launch you further down the road without having to go through a very, very long process with kind of the larger venture capitalists. And it could be different stages, could be even a little further along, where it's just saying that another six-figure check is going to really change what you're doing. I mean, it's definitely it's a very great value for the amount of time putting in versus what you get out of the actual network and relationship.
Yeah. And then a question that you and I talked about, and that you were like, I actually think we need to add this question to the webinar list, is just some advice that you would give other early stage founders, in healthcare startups that are thinking about taking on strategic investment. Again, like you said, a lot of times, like an ideal candidate or for Jumpstart is someone that's gone through an accelerator, they have an MVP, some product market fit, but maybe they're getting ready, to really roll out to market or scale beyond kind of their initial offering.
Yeah.
What advice would you give those entrepreneurs that are, in a position where they're getting ready to open up a new?
I guess I would say, number one, once you have the MVP and you have a customer, working with them side by side as much as possible and choosing that customer very carefully, and knowing that you're setting expectations of what you need to get out of the relationship. And in the early phases, it's more important for the startup themselves to know what they need versus what a customer might want from you. And so really being picky about where you're going to spend your time, but finding that one main customer that you can iterate the product alongside. So like using lean methodology, getting with that customer and saying, hey, we're going to start here. Here's what I'm thinking, but that might change along the way. Let's create a roadmap. Let's start and work together on it and then go from there. So being very close to your customer, I would say, is kind of, for me, number one. And I guess number two is just that venture is not really for everyone. And there's a lot of companies that you don't really need to get venture, and that if you're able to bootstrap, I would do it as far as I possibly could. And I think that's really what we did in the early phases, was bootstrap as far as you can. And once you get to that point where you're like, okay, I can't get to the next level without investment, then that's the point where you might be able to find it through venture, but you might also be able to find it through debt, or you might be able to get another type of option. So it's not for everybody, but there's certain businesses that it is very good for, and that you kind of have to think about that.
Yeah, I think that's something I have said on a few previous webinars, where it's, as a VC, I'll be the one to tell other entrepreneurs, if you don't need our money, don't take it. And I think that actually made you and Carepool an attractive investment opportunity for us, because you were being very thoughtful about who you were taking on capital from, and that you weren't eager to bring on lots of venture investments, and that you and the Carepool team were really wanting to retain control, because that's important to us. We want to make sure founders have a majority stake in their own company, because they're the ones that are going to, be driving this train forward, and they need to be incented and, hold enough of the company to want to do so. So I think that's a great piece of advice. The first piece of advice you gave, I'm curious just to get your personal experience on it, around, being somewhat picky or choosy with your customers and being very upfront and honest and authentic with them, if you will, really around here's where being realistic about here's where you are as a company, the product is, and what you can offer to that customer, and building out a roadmap of how you can grow and build with that customer. I see a lot of times entrepreneurs overselling themselves to a customer where they say they can do all of these things, and that, in reality, if that customer asks them to roll out to, all of their employees or all of their counties or whatever unit that they're rolling out to, that startup would be completely swamped and it would likely go under. So just maybe a bit of your experience and kind of how you worked with and set that level and realistic playing field with your initial customers.
Yeah, I guess, we didn't really do it perfectly the first time at all, but it
does.
But I guess, learning from that, we did set expectations about here's the big vision of the product and I think what it can do overall and what it does now. But 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago, it was, I know I can deliver this type of product, this rideshare product that you don't have, that is going to be better for people with disabilities and the aging in rural areas for versus the traditional medical rides or taxis. And it didn't matter that the technology was completely fleshed out, but it's saying, hey, I can prove this piece of the product out. The rest of this, you can build alongside of us if this works, which, I think it's going to. And so, we set expectations there. We did a very good job on that, I think, up front. But then we didn't quite set well enough expectations on what measures success on the pilot and what makes the next steps happen based on that success. So we were able to say, yeah, here's the beginning of what we got, and then survey people. And then at the end, surveys were very positive. There's less missed rides. The relationships are solving these problems that people don't, not wanting to leave their homes because now they know the driver and they can reach out, and there's just a better option there. But at the end of the successful pilot, we didn't have what are the next steps? How do we make sure that our next step is going to get our business where we need it to go? Because I have investors to show that our growth, and I have these numbers to hit, and kind of when that happens, and it is a thumbs up, what's next? Not just, oh, great, that worked, and now,
Right.
now we're up and running. So yeah, now we're more careful on what that is and what's going to be the next stage.
Yeah, kind of creating a clear roadmap for that customer of when we hit these milestones or when we succeed, here's, how we move forward with the relationship. Cool. Yeah. Well, in the effort of keeping our webinars brief and accessible to people that they don't have to sit and listen to us forever and ever, my last question for you, and then I may open it up to just questions for people that are attending, but my last question is more so a fun pitch for you of what exciting things can we expect to see from Carepool in 2020? I know that we're working on some great stuff, but straight from the horse's mouth, what are we looking at? Well,
I guess without saying too much, you can expect to see more of me, I think, down in the Southeast. And we're looking at some really interesting models about how to enter other states, and we're working with some of the top, I would say, experts in the field overall and at the government level. And that's, I guess, kind of been our path all along, is start at the top and work alongside the government. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that we're going to be doing with kind of the TNC model and how that works for Medicaid programs this year. And I think it'll be really interesting year.
Well, we're excited and here to help. I'm going to open it up for any questions. Anyone can submit in the Q&A section. So we have one, what can the funding from Jumpstart be used for? It's a great question. So we don't dictate where or how founders use their money. We do like to know that you have a good plan. Like with Josh, when he first came and did onboarding, we did kind of go through some strategy sessions of, what are the key next steps to kind of move this ship forward. So Josh, I may pass it to you on kind of where did you allocate your funds? Once we invested, we send or wire your money pretty quickly. So it was in your bank account quickly, but what did you, as a founder, how did you handle that?
Yeah, it was really needed for us to cash flow our internal team. Really, salaries was the majority of what we needed the capital for, to make sure everybody had a livable wage. And then just kind of looking at how we can grow. We needed the capital because we have Medicaid billing, so it takes a lot of capital up front to be able to payroll new markets and new drivers.
Right.
And so, yeah, we were able to use that to expand into like 3 other major markets and kind of use that as a payroll mechanism and just kind of a growth mechanism so that we had cash flow to back us up.
Yeah, I think I would say just adding on to that, most of our portfolio companies use our capital kind of for 2 things. One, to expand operations, which is really what Josh did, where he was able to pay drivers and pay for salaries for people to actually perform and make the business run. A lot of times other founders will use it on building product and investing in kind of the next version of the product, that next version that will get them to a point where they can bring on more strategic customers. So again, we don't dictate or withhold funding from companies. We really, we trust our founders to spend it wisely. And so we do like to know kind of what it's going towards, but we're not going to withhold it prior, once we make our investment decision. Another question that I have here is, did Jumpstart introduce Josh to customers?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we're working closely on that. And yeah, it's been impressive what we can get from the network. It's been, really good.
And then somewhat of a follow-up question to that, really for you, Josh, is what is one tangible milestone that you got out of working with Jumpstart that you would not have been able to get otherwise?
Well, I'm in the Midwest. I guess one big thing for me was getting a strong valuation where I felt was where I was at. And with what we had, I feel like we got a very fair valuation, and it was better than I could have gotten here in Wisconsin. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, any other, oh, wow, we keep getting good, great questions. Kevin, keep them coming. So he has a question, is March 31st a drop dead date? In other words, we may not need the funding. Is that when we should let you know? So to answer that pretty directly, so Jumpstart has open applications year round. However, we review applications kind of on two waves. So any application that's submitted before March 31st will be reviewed in our spring timeline, where anything submitted after March 31st, we won't review, but anything before March 31st, we'll review during the month of April. And then Josh, I think we got back to you before the end of April so that you can then come to Nashville pretty soon after in May. So we do try to make that decision process, relatively fast. But then Kevin, it's, if you decide that you don't need funding in that spring timeline, you can submit an application after March 31st, and that will be reviewed in the fall, where we'll make a handful of more investments in November. So we'll set up another kind of deadline to get your application in, likely the end of October. I hope that makes sense. But you can always let us know kind of what your funding timeline looks like. You can email us at contact@jsf.co, or if you're already communicating likely with our associate Gabe, he can answer any questions that you may have on when you should think about applying. All right, our last question that we have here is this directed at you, Josh. So one for you. Thanks for sharing your experiences. I was wondering what the main challenges were when moving from the accelerator to Jumpstart Foundry. So maybe going from generator to us.
Yeah, I guess really getting a succinct pitch where you're so good at it that you've practiced it 100 times in a week, and that you're you're getting your point across without over speaking it, because it took me a long time to kind of go from this kind of sales mindset of like how you sell things versus how you pitch your idea and get very succinct at how you're doing one thing the best and how you're going to be focused on that, and kind of changing the verbiage from sales to more the story about what you're doing and how you're going to do it and what you need to get there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we are going to cut it off here. Nice, right at just under 30 minutes. Josh, I really appreciate you dialing in. I know we have plenty of calls and meetings coming up anyways, but I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Hopefully it's helpful to any entrepreneurs that are considering applying for funding. Again, just to remind everyone, we have open applications year round, but we'll review anything that's submitted to us before March 31st. We'll review that in the spring. Anything submitted after March 31st will be considered for fall evaluation. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, you can reach out through the website, through contact@jsf.co. Our associate Gabe Lawrence is very responsive and is happy to jump on calls to answer all of your questions. So without further ado, thank you for joining. Josh, thank you.
Thank you.
And y'all keep an eye out for the amazing things that Carepool is going to be doing. We're excited to have them in the portfolio and know that you've got great things ahead.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Bye.